The Peterborough Ditch murders were a series of murders which took place in Cambridgeshire, England, in March 2013. All three victims were male and died from stab wounds. Their bodies were discovered dumped in ditches outside Peterborough. In Hertford, two other men were stabbed but survived. The perpetrator was Joanne Dennehy, a Cambridgeshire woman, who was later sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order. She is the first woman in English history to be directly given a whole life order. What drove Joanne Dennehy to kill? Joanne Dennehy had a troubled life. Born in St. Albans, Hertfordshire, in August 1982, Dennehy left home at age 16 when she ran off with her boyfriend, 21-year-old John Treener. When Dennehy got pregnant in 1999 at 17, she was furious because she didn't want children. As soon as her daughter was born, Dennehy began drinking, using drugs, and cutting herself. She came out of hospital, and the first thought of her mind is to get stoned, Treener said, according to The Sun. Despite her behavior, she got pregnant again in 2005. Treener later left her and took the children away from her and the toxic environment that she had created for all of them. She was cheating on him, self-harming, and appeared to be a threat to his family. His instincts proved to be spot on, but even he didn't know how far Dennehy would go. After he left, she moved to the city of Peterborough, where she met Gary Stretch Richards, who was smitten with her despite her problems. She also allegedly funded her addictions through sex work, which could have led her to hatred of men. It wasn't until February of 2012, when Joanne Dennehy was 29, that her problems were brought to light. Dennehy was arrested for theft and then admitted to a hospital for psychiatric treatment. During this time, she was diagnosed with antisocial disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Then, a little over a year after her arrest, Joanne Dennehy began her 10-day killing spree. The murder spree. Joanne Dennehy began her vicious murders with 31-year-old Lucas Slabishevsky. The two of them had met in Peterborough just days before Dennehy decided to kill him. After drinking together, she took him to another house that her landlord owned and blindfolded him. As reported by Cambridgeshire Live, Slabishevsky told his friends that he was going to meet up with the woman he thought was his new girlfriend. Instead, Joanne Dennehy stabbed him in the heart. She then stored him in a dumpster until she took her next victim. 10 days after killing Slabishevsky, Joanne Dennehy killed one of her housemates, 56-year-old John Chapman, in the same manner. Then, hours later, she murdered their landlord, 48-year-old Kevin Lee, with whom she was having an affair. Before killing Lee, she convinced him to wear a black sequin dress. Disposing of the bodies is where her accomplices come in. Gary Stretch Richards, 47, and Leslie Layton, 36, helped Dennehy transport and dump the victims in ditches, including putting Lee in a sexually explicit position to humiliate him further. Later, Dennehy's accomplices claimed that they didn't want to help her but gave in to their fear, according to the BBC. Even though Richards was over 7 feet tall, he still held on to this story. She must have been quite an imposing figure, even though he towered over her by almost 2 feet. On the way back from dumping her last two victims, the trio drove west across the country to the town of Hertford, looking for more people for Dennehy to murder. On the drive, according to the BBC, Dennehy turned to Richards and said, "I want my fun. I need you to get my fun." Once in Hertford, they came across two men, John Rogers and Robin Braza, who were walking their dogs. Dennehy stabbed Braza in the shoulder and chest, and then she stabbed Rogers over 40 times. It was only by quick medical help that these two were able to be saved and identify her during her trial. Joanne Dennehy later said that she only targeted men because she was a mother and didn't want to kill other women, especially not a woman with a child. But killing men, she reasoned, could be good entertainment. Later, she told a psychiatrist that she developed a desire for more killing after Slabishevsky because she got a taste for it. How she was caught. 2 days after Joanne Dennehy murdered Kevin Lee, his family reported him missing. He was discovered in the ditch that Dennehy left him in. Police identified Joanne Dennehy as a person of interest, but when they attempted to question her, she ran along with Richards. It lasted all of 2 days before they tracked her down. Her arrest seemed to amuse her more than anything else. While being booked, she laughed, joked, and flirted with the male police officer who processed her, according to the Daily Mail. While waiting for trial, the police found her diary with an escape plot that involved cutting off a guard's finger to use his fingerprint to fool the security system. She was placed in solitary confinement for 2 years until after the court proceedings had concluded. After pleading guilty to everything, Joanne Dennehy was sentenced to life in prison, and the trial judge ordered that she never be released. He said this was because of her premeditation and lack of a normal range of human emotions. According to Cambridgeshire Live, she is one of 3 women in the United Kingdom to be given this whole life tariff, along with Rosemary West and Myra Hindley, who died in 2002. Richards was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 19 years, and Layton got 14 years. Court proceedings. In November 2013, Dennehy pleaded guilty to all 3 murders and 2 further attempted murders. Her sister Maria was unsurprised by the guilty plea and said, "I think she did that to control the situation. She likes people to know she's the boss." Dennehy was held on remand at imprisoned Bronzefield. Assessing psychiatrists later diagnosed Dennehy with psychopathic, antisocial, and borderline personality disorders. The trial began at the Old Bailey in London, where Dennehy could be seen laughing during proceedings and pled guilty to the murders, stating, "I have pleaded guilty." And that's that when questioned about her decision. At one point during her trial, Dennehy stood up and told presiding Mr. Justice Spencer, "I don't want to be controlled by anybody. I don't want to be controlled by my lawyers, by the police, by anybody." On February 28, 2014, Mr. Justice Spencer called Dennehy a cruel, calculating, selfish, and manipulative serial killer and sentenced her to life imprisonment with an additional order that she should never be released due to the premeditation of each murder. Spencer said further that Dennehy was sadomasochistic and lacked a normal range of human emotions. Dennehy was the 3rd woman in the UK to be given a whole life tariff, after Myra Hindley and Rosemary West. 2 men, Richards, 47, and Leslie Layton, 36, stood trial charged with a range of crimes relating to assisting Dennehy. Both decided not to give evidence in their defense. The jury began deliberation on February 4, 2014. On 10 February, Richards was found guilty of attempted murder, and Layton was found guilty of perverting the course of justice. On 12 February, Layton and Richards were convicted of all other charges. Richards was sentenced at the Old Bailey alongside Dennehy to life imprisonment with a recommended minimum term of 19 years. Layton was sentenced to a total of 14 years, and Robert Moore, 55, who admitted to assisting an offender, received a 3-year prison sentence. Escape plot. While she was on remand before the trial, Dennehy was housed in segregation at imprisoned Bronzefield, a Category A prison in Surrey. Prison staff found an escape plot in her diary, which has involved killing or seriously injuring a prison officer, cutting off one of the officer's fingers, and using the amputated finger to fool the biometric system in the prison. Because of the plot, Dennehy was placed in solitary confinement from September 2013 before the court proceedings to September 2015 after the proceedings. She claims isolation left her tearful and upset and led to self-harm. The High Court of Justice rejected Dennehy's claim that her human rights had been violated. Government lawyers argued isolation was necessary due to the nature of Dennehy's offenses and the risk she could pose to the public if she were to escape. Mr. Justice Singh found solitary confinement was in accordance with law. At all material times, it has been necessary and proportionate. Prison life. After a trial, Dennehy was returned to HMP Bronzefield. In 2018, she requested permission to marry her cellmate Haley Palmer and received a positive answer from prison authorities, to the dismay of Palmer's family, who feared Dennehy might endanger her. In 2018, both Dennehy and Palmer tried to kill themselves during a suicide pact. In June 2020, she was reported to be in a relationship with another prisoner, M. Lightkin, a 25-year-old serving a 12-year sentence for her part in the murder of a man whose body was dumped outside a social club. In May 2021, it was again reported Dennehy and Palmer, since released from a 16-year robbery sentence, intended to marry. In 2019, Dennehy was moved to Low Newton Prison in County Durham. Upon her arrival, she allegedly threatened to kill Rosemary West, who was moved to another prison.